Today I want to talk to you about a topic called a lifetime or dead time. I also want to talk to you about Malcolm X. Now, Malcolm X, he was a criminal. And at the time, back in the mid-40s, I think it was about 1946, he went to jail. And he was called Detroit Red back then. He wasn't called Malcolm X. The author Robert Greene calls those times when we're either living or we're dying. He calls it a lifetime or dead time. And it relates a lot to Malcolm X and what he did. His little story will explain that more. As I said, he was called Detroit Red at the time. He did a little bit of everything, Malcolm X. He was into drugs, sold drugs, armed robbery. He ran numbers. He worked as a pimp. He ran a burglary gang. He was just a bad guy. And finally he got arrested and he was trying to sell an expensive watch that he'd stolen. He was also carrying a gun. He never used it on the police, but he was given 10 years in prison. And he was just 21 years old at the time. And as I said, Robert Greene, he calls this a lifetime or dead time. He says there are two types of time in our lives. Dead time when people are passive and waiting, and a lifetime when people are learning and acting and utilising every second. Every moment of failure, every moment of or situation that we don't deliberately choose or control presents this choice. So it's either a lifetime or dead time. Now, when Malcolm went to jail, he chose a lifetime. He began to learn. He taught himself to read, and how he did that, he got a pencil and a dictionary, and he copied out the words and the definitions of every single word in the entire dictionary. Can you imagine that? Just sitting there, every single word, he would write them down and write down the definition. And he started reading, and he read the dictionary cover to cover, wrote every word down, and he says from when I went in until I left prison, if I wasn't reading in the library, I was reading in my bunk. He read history, he read religion, he read the classics, he read philosophy. And when people ask him what school he went to, he says books. That was his school, books. And it's amazing how a lot of us just don't read anymore. We just refuse to read. So that's what Malcolm X did. And a lot of people know what Malcolm X did after he got out of jail, but not many people know what he did in jail. And it was his choice. And he could have chosen to stay in jail, and back in those times, in mid-40s, he could have learnt more about how to be an even better criminal and made lots more contacts, but he chose to study and learn and educate himself. And how many of us just don't do that? We have this time, and certainly during COVID, it's the perfect time to be doing what Malcolm X did, to be educating yourself, to be studying, to be learning something new, to be starting something new, to be reading. Most people don't do it. They instead choose dead time. They sit in front of the TV hour after hour. They just, they read comic books, or they just do silly stuff. They play online games. They're on the internet the whole time, just scrolling through things, looking for something to make their life exciting. And they never find it. So that's dead time. And you look at other people who changed their life through using, being in a bad situation, but turning it into an opportunity. Viktor Frankl, who I've spoken about before, and he defined his theories on psychology while he was suffering all these horrible ordeals in 3 different Nazi concentration camps. Ian Fleming, for example, who is the 007 man, James Bond, he was on bed rest and he was forbidden by his doctor to write another Bond novel because the doctor said it would be too much stress on his body and too hard to handle, and he wasn't allowed to use a typewriter. So instead he wrote Chitty Chitty Bang Bang by hand in bed. He chose that time to go and write another amazing book. Walt Disney was hospitalised after stepping on a rusty nail, and he was in hospital, and it was there he decided to pursue cartooning. That's where his cartooning stuff came from. So Disneyland, all that. When we're faced with obstacles, and as I say, COVID, this pandemic, as they call it, is a great time to be learning. So how are you spending your time? Are you spending it in a lifetime, or are you spending it as dead time? It might feel good to become angry, to become sad, to become down, to become depressed, deprived, heartbroken during these kinds of times. But a far more productive approach is to not be so short-sighted and instead look to the future. Look to what's going to happen after this. And are you setting yourself up for the future, or are you just setting yourself up for more failure look at where you are now, do a bit of a reconnaissance on yourself and just see where you are and just imagine where you can be when this is all over and start working on that. Use it as a live time and not dead time. And I really love that whole analogy from Robert Greene, who's written a lot of fantastic books as well. So that was the Malcolm X story. I really enjoyed that, reading about Malcolm X and just how he spent that time. He ended up doing 7 years of his 10-year stint. And of course he got out and he changed his name, Malcolm X, and went on to do some amazing things with his life. But just imagine sitting there day after day, going through the dictionary, writing down every single word, every single definition, and just doing it and just letting it sink into your mind and learning all these new words and educating yourself. We don't read enough. We need to do more reading. There was no Kindle books, there was no internet where he could research stuff. He just had to get the hard copy books and just get a pencil and just write it all down. Just amazing. There's some amazing stories out there from people from many, many years ago, and we tend to forget that there was no internet back then, and they did things the hard way, and they were probably better people for it. Just think about what you're doing. Are you using this time as a live time or dead time? And if you're using it as dead time, well, start thinking about using it as a live time and changing your life, moving forward, learning, educating yourself.